Imagine this. You're walking through a vast, silent corridor lined with mirrors. Each one reflects a version of you, not as you are, but as you were told to be. One mirror shows you wearing the job title your parents always wanted for you. Another reflects the partner you were told was ideal. One shows you thinner, wealthier, more admired. In each, you look almost happy, but not quite. There's something dead behind the eyes. A subtle ache like the hollow echo of a life never questioned, only performed. You stop, disoriented, staring at yourself multiplied and distorted. Then you realize none of these mirrors were made by you. They were forged by voices you no longer even hear. Childhood expectations, cultural scripts, unspoken rules. You're not sure when you started measuring your worth by these reflections, but now they surround you and you can't look away. What happens when the person you think you're supposed to be becomes a cage? What if everything you've been chasing, success, perfection, approval, has been quietly hijacking your authenticity? Here's the paradox that gnaws quietly beneath the surface of so many lives. You're told to dream big, but not too big. Be yourself, but only if that self is acceptable. Strive to improve, but only in the ways that society deems worthy. We live in a world that shouts freedom from every rooftop, while silently punishing those who stray from the script. You may feel free, but in truth, you're often just playing your part in a play you didn't write, on a stage you didn't choose, before an audience that may never applaud. Have you ever asked yourself why your goals are what they are? Why you want the things you want? Most people never do. They assume that because a desire burns brightly, it must be theirs. But desire, too, can be inherited, implanted, marketed. From the moment you could speak, expectations started layering themselves on top of your soul like coats of paint. Be polite, be pretty, be strong, be ambitious, don't cry, don't fail, don't disappoint. And like any structure built on 1,000 invisible blueprints, you began to confuse the architecture with identity. But here's the unnerving truth. Expectations don't just guide us, they confine us. They limit what we dare to attempt, how deeply we connect, how freely we feel. They give us a script, but they steal the possibility of improvisation. There's a strange kind of suffering that comes from living a life that looks good on paper but feels wrong in your bones. It's the quiet misery of someone who has done everything right, checked every box, climbed every ladder, and yet still feels like they're watching their life through glass, always one step removed. What if the greatest obstacle to your growth is not laziness, fear, or failure, but the very idea of who you think you're supposed to become? What if self-improvement, as it's often sold to you, is just another form of control? A polished cage made of motivational posters, morning routines, and the endless chase for optimization. We praise discipline and goals, but rarely question their origin. We pursue success, but rarely ask whose definition we're using. The danger isn't in striving, but in never examining why we strive in the first place. Are you becoming more you, or are you just becoming more acceptable? This isn't about abandoning ambition, it's about interrogating it. Because underneath all the self-help slogans and vision boards, there's a haunting truth. Becoming who others expect you to be can feel safer than becoming who you truly are. But safety is not freedom, and comfort is not fulfillment. So the question becomes, what parts of your life are truly yours, and what parts are just echoes of someone else's dream? What if your truest self, the one you've buried under layers of expectation, is still waiting beneath the noise. And if that's true, how do you even begin to find it? You feel the pressure building. The mirrors tremble. A faint crack forms in the one closest to you. Not from force, but from doubt, the first fracture in the illusion. You stare into that crack, unsure whether you're terrified or liberated. Because if everything you've built has been shaped by expectation, then dismantling it means starting over. But maybe that's the only path to something real. Not perfection, not approval, not the person they wanted, just you. But who are you without their voices, without their dreams, without their applause? Let's go deeper, because to escape the prison of expectation, we must first understand how it was built and why we never noticed the bars. The prison of expectation is not made of steel or stone. It is crafted from something far more insidious: belief. A belief that who you are is not enough. Not yet, not quite, not really. And so you must improve. You must become. You must chase an ever-moving target, never pausing long enough to ask, who said it in the first place? You weren't born chasing approval. You were born crying, raw and unfiltered, a pure expression of need and sensation. But quickly, you learned. Some cries are met with warmth, others with silence. Some behaviors bring smiles, others disappointment. Slowly and often without words, a code is written into your psyche. This is what gets love. This is what keeps me safe. Carl Jung called this the development of the persona, the mask we wear to adapt to society. At first, it serves a purpose. It helps us survive. But what begins as adaptation slowly mutates into identity. The mask becomes a mirror, and we forget there's a face underneath. We confuse performance with authenticity. As children, we are blank slates, but not empty ones. We are sensitive instruments absorbing every signal. The subtle sigh of a parent, the raised eyebrow of a teacher, the celebratory tone reserved for success. From these fragments, we construct our sense of worth. And in doing so, we begin to live not for the sake of being, but for the promise of being enough. Someday, somehow. This is the quiet genesis of internalized expectation, and because it happens so early, so subtly, we often don't recognize it. We believe that the goals we pursue are our own, when in fact, they were planted like seeds by the world around us. Culture, family, school, religion, media, each one whispering, "This is who you should be." But here's where it gets darker. What if the self you're improving isn't even the real you? What if self-improvement, when built on the foundation of external expectation, is just the polishing of a false self? Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what if the why you've inherited is a lie? What if you're not improving your life, but just becoming better at hiding from yourself? We rarely question the roots of our desires. We chase status, beauty, recognition. We fear failure, loneliness, irrelevance. But are these fears organic or implanted? Are they authentic or adopted? Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, observed that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning. But the tragedy of modern life is that many suffer not from a lack of meaning, but from living out meanings that aren't theirs. They suffer in silence, haunted by the echo of someone else's purpose. And yet society praises them. The person who has it all but feels hollow is often the one most celebrated. Their life becomes an aesthetic, curated, filtered, applauded, while their soul slowly starves. They become successful according to the world, and strangers envy them. But in the privacy of night, they wonder, why does this still feel empty? Arthur Schopenhauer, the pessimist philosopher, once said that we are free to do what we want, but not to want what we want. In other words, our desires often don't originate within us. They are shaped by forces beyond us. algorithms, advertisements, archetypes. We believe we're choosing, but we're mostly conforming, and conformity, though comforting, kills the soul by inches. Consider the concept of self-betrayal. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free. That is, we are responsible for our choices, whether we like it or not. When we live out someone else's expectations without resistance, we are choosing bad faith. We betray our freedom in exchange for comfort, but comfort over time becomes a coffin. This betrayal happens in the smallest of ways: taking a job you hate because it's stable, marrying someone safe instead of someone true, editing your opinions to avoid disapproval, and slowly your true self becomes a ghost, haunting the life you were supposed to live. The worst part? This process doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like progress. You read the self-help books, you journal, you meditate, you optimize your mornings and track your habits. But all of it, beneath the surface, is still in service to an ideal self built from expectations. It's self-improvement as self-erosion, a beautiful prison lined with motivational quotes. Because you're not improving yourself, you're performing the role of someone who's getting better. And society loves this. It sells you the illusion that happiness lies just around the corner, after the next promotion, the next relationship, the next upgrade. But that corner never ends. Because the one thing the system fears most is a person who no longer needs it for validation, a person who no longer improves to be loved, but acts out of love itself. There's a philosophical quietness in those who shed expectation. They become dangerous, not in the violent sense, but in the existential one. They threaten the very fabric of a culture built on comparison and conformity. They stop striving to become someone and start returning to someone they were before the world told them who to be. So the hidden problem isn't that expectations exist, it's that they feel like truth. They wear the costume of wisdom, they promise order, but they extract a price, the death of authenticity. And here lies the tension. To be free, truly free, you must risk rejection. You must walk into the unknown without a script. You must disappoint those who expected you to become someone else. But how? How do you break a spell that you didn't know you were under? The answer is coming, but not yet. First, we must look into the mirror of consequences. Because what happens when we spend our entire lives chasing expectations that were never ours to begin with? Let's find out. Look around you. The world hums with ambition, movement, and metrics. The number of followers, the size of your bank account, the prestige of your alma mater, these are no longer just data points. They've become currencies of worth. And underneath the sleek surface of modern life lies something far more disquieting, a silent epidemic of people succeeding at things that do not matter to them. What happens to a human soul when it's calibrated by comparison, when the internal compass rusts from disuse and the map you follow leads to someone else's treasure? At first, the damage is invisible. You follow the path of success, good grades, good job, good reputation, and for a while, it works. You feel validated, celebrated, seen. But underneath the applause, something else begins to stir, a vague sense of disconnection, a dissonance between the life you're living and the one your bones remember wanting. But you push it away. You call it stress or burnout or just a phase. You double down. Optimize harder, wake up earlier, achieve more. After all, the world tells you that if you feel empty, it's because you haven't filled yourself enough. But what if you're pouring effort into the wrong vessel? The human mind is astonishingly adaptable, but that adaptability can become its own prison. Through the lens of cognitive dissonance, we learn to make peace with contradiction. You hate your job, but you convince yourself it's just for now. You feel numb in your relationship, but you say, "At least I'm not alone." These micro-adjustments keep you afloat, but never free. Neuroscience tells us that the brain craves certainty, even at the expense of truth. Once expectations become deeply embedded, your mind begins filtering reality through their lens. You start seeing only what reinforces the narrative. This is what success looks like. This is who I'm supposed to be. Anything else, any flicker of dissent from your authentic self, is rationalized away, buried, or labeled irrational. And so the most tragic consequence unfolds. You begin to lose access to your own inner world. Your intuition grows quiet. Your desires feel confusing. You no longer trust yourself to want what you want. You look outward, again, asking others to validate your direction, and the cycle continues, a life curated for external applause, while the soul starves in a house it did not build. This is not melodrama, it is the slow death of self-trust. Arthur Miller once wrote, "Maybe all one can do is hope to end up with the right regrets." But what if we could go further? What if we could notice the regrets forming now in real time and choose differently? Because the longer you live by the script of expectation, the more difficult it becomes to distinguish between who you are and who you perform. The self becomes fragmented. One part of you yearns for authenticity, another warns that it's dangerous. One part dreams, another calculates. You're torn between the life that makes sense on paper and the one that whispers through your daydreams. The consequences manifest in many forms: chronic dissatisfaction, the haunting sense that no accomplishment ever feels as good as it was supposed to; existential fatigue, a weariness that no amount of rest cures because it isn't physical, it's ontological. You're tired of being who you're not. Anxiety and depression masked as normal life stress. Not all pain comes from trauma. Some of it comes from trying to be someone you're not for too long. The Sunday scaries, that creeping dread before the work week, not because the work is hard, but because it feels meaningless. And perhaps most dangerously, emotional dissociation. You become a spectator of your own life. You perform joy, you mimic motivation, you master the art of seeming okay. But inside, the self watches from behind glass, untouched and unheard. Society reinforces this with cunning subtlety. It rewards conformity with convenience. It praises sacrifice without ever asking who you're sacrificing for. Even the tools of resistance, therapy, mindfulness, wellness culture, can be hijacked by the same forces they're meant to fight. You start meditating not to reconnect with yourself, but to increase productivity. You go to therapy not to question your goals, but to tolerate them better. Even rebellion gets commodified. So the prison deepens. Thinkers like Aldous Huxley warned us about this. In Brave New World, people were not controlled through fear, but through pleasure. They were pacified by comfort, distracted by entertainment, and numbed by synthetic satisfaction. There were no chains, only distractions. And the cost of this painless existence? Depth, truth, self. You may not live in a dystopia, but consider this. How many of your choices were made freely? How many of your values are truly yours, untouched by branding, inheritance, or fear? The scariest prison is the one you decorate yourself. But here's the shift. This realization, painful as it is, can become power, because to see the trap is the first step to escaping it. Awareness is a blade, and now you hold it. You begin to realize that you've been carrying weights that were never yours. Expectations, ideals, scripts, and with every step forward, they've quietly narrowed your path. But what if you could step off the path entirely? What if everything you've been told about growth, success, and identity is a cage made to look like a throne? The consequences of living by expectation are not just personal, they're cultural. Entire societies are built on conformity. But every rebellion begins in the quiet moment, when one person dares to ask, what if there's another way? Not better, not faster, not more impressive, just truer. And from that question, a new possibility begins to flicker on the horizon. A self built not on performance, but on presence, not on expectation, but on truth, not on becoming, but on being. But to walk toward that light, you'll have to break something sacred. You'll have to break the myth that says you must become who they want to be, who you are. In the next breath, in the next section, you'll begin that rebellion. You'll learn how to dismantle the architecture of expectation, not by retreating, but by remembering who you were before they told you who to be. Are you ready to break free? It doesn't begin with a roar. It begins with a whisper, not a motivational speech or a 5-step life hack, but a still, unglamorous moment of defiance, the kind of rebellion no one sees. No flags waved, no crowds cheering, just you in the quiet chaos of your mind, asking the most dangerous question a person can ask in a world built on illusion. What if I stopped trying to become and just allowed myself to be? The moment you ask it, truly ask it, the old structure begins to shake. Because now, for the first time, you are not trying to improve the mask. You are questioning the need for one. This is not self-sabotage. This is not laziness. This is war. A sacred one. Against a system inside you and around you that profits from your perpetual dissatisfaction. To break free, you must first recognize the architecture of your conditioning. The way you've been taught to outsource self-worth to metrics, milestones, and mirrors. The way even your deepest desires have been hijacked, wrapped in velvet ropes and sold back to you as dreams. So how do you break this? Not with force, but with truth. Counterintuitive truth. Truth that disturbs, liberates, and leaves nothing untouched. Start here. 1. Doubt the dream. Ask yourself, who gave me this dream? Strip your goals naked. If you crave success, define it without using money, titles, or praise. If you want love, remove the image of cinematic perfection. If you long for purpose, find it outside the language of legacy or productivity. Most people never do this. They inherit dreams like heirlooms, polish them, chase them, and never stop to ask if they like them. But the rebel questions the dream itself. Not to destroy it, but to make it true. As Nietzsche wrote, no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. The first rebellion is radical honesty. No filters, no borrowed ambition. Just this, what is mine and what is not? 2. Redefine progress. What if becoming more like yourself was the highest form of progress? In the world of self-improvement, progress is measured by how efficiently you mold yourself to fit the world. But in this new rebellion, the metric flips. Progress is how bravely you unlearn what never belonged to you. Imagine this. Instead of trying to fix your flaws, you begin to understand their origin. Instead of seeking validation, you build intimacy with your own opinion. You stop asking, am I good enough yet? And start asking, am I still aligned with myself? This is not regression. This is revolution. 3rd, reclaim the present. Expectation is always future-bound. It lures you into a hypothetical horizon. The better body, the better job, the better you. But freedom lives in the present, the messy, unspectacular now. You reclaim the present by ceasing the performance. Let yourself do things without optimizing them. Write without thinking of readers. Walk without counting steps. Speak without scripting. Presence is what happens when you stop trying to impress a phantom audience. The world may see you as unproductive, ordinary, or aimless, but inside, something else stirs. You. As Jean-Paul Sartre insisted, existence comes before essence. You are not a static thing to be perfected. You are an unfolding being, and the only place unfolding can happen is now. So return to it, not to be perfect, but to be here. 4. Destroy the idol of should. Every expectation is built on this altar. You should be smarter, fitter, calmer, more disciplined, more popular, more something. This should is a tyrant dressed in reason. It sounds helpful, rational, but it poisons you by implying that who you are as you are is insufficient. Burn it. Reclaim the word want. What do you want? Not in the performative, conditioned sense, but in the quiet, irrational murmur of your inner voice. What feels magnetic even if it scares you? What would you choose if no one ever saw the result? Live from that place. It may mean walking away from prestige, from the life everyone else envies, from the identity you've spent years cultivating. That's why this is rebellion, not comfort, not ease, but truth. And truth always asks for sacrifice. 5. Choose sacred disappointment. To be free, you must disappoint people, sometimes the ones you love most. Your parents may not understand. Your peers may look at you sideways. The world may call you foolish, idealistic, unstable. Let them. The price of authenticity is the willingness to let go of the illusion that you can please everyone and be yourself. This is sacred disappointment, not cruelty, not rebellion for rebellion's sake, but the gentle, terrifying choice to choose your own soul over someone else's story. Let them down. Let them misunderstand. Let them think what they want. And in the quiet that follows, you will hear something astonishing: yourself. 6. Walk into the unknown. Breaking free is not about having a perfect plan. It's about walking away from the plan that was killing you. There will be confusion. There will be silence where noise used to be. But that silence is not emptiness. It is space. Room for something real to grow, something unscripted, something alive. Aldous Huxley warned that our greatest enemy isn't censorship, it's distraction. And perhaps that's the final piece of this rebellion, the choice to slow down, to go inward, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing who you are until something truer emerges, because you don't find yourself by reading more quotes or refining your goals. You find yourself when you stop running and stand still long enough to feel the ground again. You have not arrived at the final truth yet, but now the path is visible. Not the path to who you should be, but to who you already are beneath the noise. You have doubted the dream. You have redefined progress. You have touched the rawness of presence. And now something ancient is stirring. A memory not of facts, but of essence. But before the final realization can emerge, something deeper must die. One last illusion, one last veil. And on the other side, something terrifying and sacred and utterly free. Are you ready for the truth behind it all? Imagine this. You've burned the script. The applause has faded. The expectations have crumbled like dust in your hands. You stand now in the quiet aftermath, not triumphant, not broken, just bare. No more roles to play, no more images to protect. And in that terrifying silence, a question rises, not from your mind, but from the marrow of your being. If I am not who I was told to be, then who am I? This is where many turn back, because the freedom they sought begins to look like emptiness. The identity they dismantled was painful, yes, but at least it gave them shape. Now, with no expectations to conform to, no metrics to chase, there is only being, and it feels like death. But here is the final paradoxical truth, the one the world will never market to you, the one no self-help book dares to center. You were never broken, you were just buried. All your striving, your shame, your self-improvement, it was never about becoming more. It was about remembering what was forgotten, reclaiming what had been conditioned out of you, peeling back the noise until only one thing remained, a still, silent, unwavering presence. You, not the idea of you, not the story of you, but the living, breathing truth of you, free from interpretation, free from improvement, free from the ceaseless violence of should. This is the final rebellion, and it doesn't feel like a battle. It feels like coming home. You were taught to think that your worth lies in what you do, how you appear, who approves of you. But that was a lie designed to keep you hungry, forever reaching, never arriving. The truth is quieter. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. You are not a problem to solve. You are a presence to inhabit. Read that again. Let it unsettle you. Let it offend every voice that told you otherwise. Schopenhauer believed that human suffering was rooted in the endless pursuit of desires, always chasing, never fulfilled. But what if the escape is not in killing desire, but in realizing that the deepest desire is not for a different life, but for a life that is real? And reality, unfiltered by expectation, is not glamorous. It's raw, strange, sometimes deeply unremarkable, but it's yours. You don't need to constantly transform to earn your existence. You don't need to curate every moment to prove your significance. You don't need to become someone else to be lovable, worthy, or whole. All of that was scaffolding, useful maybe, but never essential. Now the scaffolding is gone, and you are standing in the cathedral of your own soul, stripped and whole, echoing with silence and truth. This is the place where all expectations dissolve, not in defeat but in irrelevance, because the ultimate truth is not that you need to become anything, it's that there is nothing missing from you in this moment. Nothing to fix, nothing to earn, nothing to prove. The world around you, of course, will try to pull you back in. It will speak in the familiar language of urgency, comparison, achievement. But now you hear it differently. Not as law, but as suggestion. Not as truth, but as noise. You can play the game, but you no longer belong to it. This is what Viktor Frankl understood in the darkest pits of the Holocaust. That meaning is not something handed down by culture. It is something chosen, even in suffering, especially in suffering. And the most profound meaning is not found in chasing the image of a better self, but in the radical act of being deeply with who you already are. So now the illusion is gone. You see clearly. You see that the self you were told to construct, the high-performing, endlessly improving, socially impressive self, was never the destination. It was a detour, a performance, a scaffolding of survival. But you survived, and now you remember, not in words, but in silence. Not in achievement, but in awareness. And in that space, something divine begins to awaken. Not outside you, not above you, but as you. A stillness that can laugh, a quietness that can roar, a truth that doesn't need permission. You have spent your life trying to reach some imagined summit where you would finally be enough. But now you see. You were never climbing a mountain. You were digging through rubble. Excavating, returning, becoming less so you could be more real. So here you are. No mask, no performance, no expectation. Just a single, terrifying, beautiful question. What now? And the answer, whatever you choose. You are free, not because someone gave you permission, but because you revoked their authority, because you saw through the lie, because you dared to stop running and feel everything you are. From this place, goals are no longer cages, they are choices. Success is no longer currency, it is alignment. Identity is no longer fixed. It is a fluid, living dance between what's within you and what the world evokes from you. There is no one left to impress, no race left to win. Only this. The soft, sacred miracle of being here, fully, consciously, without apology. This is the rebellion that never ends, because every day the world will try to make you forget, and every day you will remember again, not with effort, but with presence, not with striving, but with surrender, not with transformation, but with truth, the ultimate truth. You are not what they expected. You never were. And that is your greatest power. Welcome home.